Hello boys and girls, welcome along to the first programme that I've recorded for you because I'm not able to come into school to speak to you in class or in assembly, but I can speak to you through these programmes. So rather than me come in person, I've decided I would do this. Now today we're going to think about the most important people in Christianity, and we're going to go all around the world and also across time. So I've got my passport so we can travel on the plane, and we're going to go to a place that's much hotter than here for the very first person we're going to speak about. So pack your bags and let's go. So, to begin with, I suppose if you're going to speak about Christianity, you need to speak about a person called Jesus Christ. Christianity. Now, sometimes people think that Christ is like Jesus' surname, like the way I'm called Edward Lyons. But the word Christ is not a surname, it's a title. And it just means Jesus, the Anointed One. All through the year you'll see that we have Christmas in the winter and Easter in the springtime, and these are things that mark the life events of Jesus. So to begin with, how could I describe who Jesus is in just a few sentences and why he's the most important person in the whole of Christianity? Well, to sum up Jesus, we could put it like this. If you want to know what God is like, then you've not to imagine a man with a big white beard living in a cloud far away. In fact, God is not somebody you need to go looking for in the distance, but somebody who came to look for us. So when you read the Bible and you hear the stories of the life of Jesus, you discover that he's born in a manger, he grew up as a small boy. The man who was his adopted father was a carpenter, and he learned how to work with his hands, and then he spent his life using those hands and his voice to help people learn about themselves, and to help them learn about God, and to help them learn what God wants for each one of us. And because that's the happiest life of all, to know the life that you could live in light of God. And Christianity tells us that Jesus taught, he performed miracles, he was crucified on a cross and died, but that power that sent him to earth also had the power to raise him from the grave. So the great thing about following Jesus is this: every single bit of our lives can be helped by Jesus, because Jesus has lived every bit of our lives. Sometimes people say, you should try being in my shoes for a day. And what they mean by that is, if you could be them for just one day, you would know what it was like to be them. Jesus tried on our shoes, and not just for one day, but for a whole lifetime, so that we can know God does know what it's like to be you, and he does know what it's like to be me. So Jesus started it, and now we're going to fly to another part of the world, away from Israel, and we'll see what some of the people who followed Jesus did. And the first one is leaving the warmth of Israel to go back to the cold of Britain. So get your passports, and we'll get to the plane, and we'll go to the next person that I want to speak about, and I'll tell you what they did. Oh, well, if you were on a plane today, you would need to wear one of these, which is a mask. But not only do you need to wear a mask today, you also need to keep 2-metre distances when you're in certain places. I want you to imagine on a ship, and on a ship where you can't keep a 2-metre distance at all, because there's somebody right there, and there's somebody right there, and there's somebody above you, and there's somebody below you. I want you to imagine a ship full of people, so packed that you can barely move, and you have to stay in that ship between the great continent of Africa and America. For a long time, several hundred years ago, that's what happened on ships. Ships would leave our country, and as they left Britain, they would sail down into Africa, and they would take with them rum and nice fabrics, and they would give them to the people in Africa. And the people then gave the people on the ship people as slaves. And the ships got full of these people until they were packed, and then they were sailed over to America. And in America they were made work on farms, and they had to work long hours, receive next to no pay, and were often ill-treated. And then the Americans, to give thanks for the slaves, sent tobacco and other things like cotton from their country back over to Britain. So we got the tobacco and the cotton and money, and the people in Africa got rum and materials, and the American people got slaves. Can you work out who in this triangle doesn't get anything? That's right, the slave. The slaves get nothing in this deal. In fact, the slaves lost everything. But in Britain, in Hull, in 1753, there was a man born called William Wilberforce. And William Wilberforce was a Christian writer and thinker and social reformer. And that means that because of his Christian faith, he tried to shape Britain to make it a better country to live in. And William Wilberforce spent many, many years working at Parliament to get the people who governed the country to stop slavery. Well, the first few times they just laughed when William Wilberforce told them that it did not matter whether a person had white skin or black skin, they were still made in God's image. But he never gave up. He kept at it year after year after year. Eventually, slavery in Britain was stopped. We stopped sailing ships down to Africa, and we stopped taking people from Africa over to America. The slave trade came to an end. And part of that coming to an end was because of one Christian man called William Wilberforce, who spent much of his life making sure that it would stop. And it did. What a brave man. Passport time. We're going to leave England and we're going to go to another part of the world. A bit hotter, this place, and we're going to hear of another Christian who's very famous and who did something incredibly special as well. Masks on if we're going on the plane. When I was your age at school, I don't know if I knew who the President of the United States of America was. It turned out it's a man called Ronald Reagan. But I can imagine, even though you're at primary school in Scotland, you could tell me at least one name of a person who at the moment is, or maybe was, the President of the United States of America. And that's a man called Donald Trump. And this is because for many of us, we might think that America today is a very scary place. Now, the second person that I want you to think about after Jesus is a man called Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King was born in America, and he was born in 1929, and he was killed in America in 1968. But before he was killed, he did something which was quite incredible. You see, it's not just now that we might think America is quite scary. America was really, really scary for people growing up in the 1950s and 60s if you were not white. There were whole shops and buses and cafes and even schools that only some people in America were allowed to go to and other people not. Imagine sitting on a bus and having to stand up and give your seat to someone just because of the colour of your skin. Well, in the 1940s and 50s in America, if you were from Africa originally, or your parents or their parents, and you were sitting on a bus and a white person got on the bus, they could take the seat from you. There was all kinds of trouble, riots in the streets and people fighting and shops being burned. Well, Martin Luther King was a Christian minister, and he preached in his home churches where he came from in Atlanta. But eventually he started to leave Atlanta, and he went all across America preaching that it was wrong for people to be treated differently according to the colour of their skin. They were all American. They had American passports. And, as he said, they were all God's children, made in God's image. And God loved the people with black skin just as much as the people with white skin. Well, Martin Luther spent years working at this, and eventually a day did come in America when it did not matter what the colour of your skin was. You could sit in that seat on a bus, and if you were clever enough, you could go to any school or college to study. And if you worked hard enough, you could become a great baseball player, a great American football player, and as one even showed the other year, you could become the President of the United States of America. Now, India is the second largest populated country in the entire world. And some people in India have lots of money, but most people in India don't have much money at all. And boys and girls your age, many of them don't have houses, they don't have schools to go to, and they don't have any kind of hospital or anyone looking after them. Mother Teresa was a Christian nun in Calcutta, and she started some very important work when she was younger, working with orphans, boys and girls who had no parents to look after them, and there was no social workers to look after them, and no teachers to look after them. They really were people living on the streets. Along with the other sisters who were part of her convent, she reached out to these boys and girls, and she fed them, and she clothed them, and she educated them. She spent her entire life living alongside them, right up until the day she died. Many boys and girls' lives in India were changed for the better because Mother Teresa wanted to show them the love of Jesus. She never owned a car or a big house or gold jewellery or anything like that. But what she did have was an enormous amount of love inside her heart. And because of that, thousands of boys and girls were helped. What an incredible person she was. A good disciple of Jesus. Well, let's jump in the plane and we'll go and see the last person that I want to speak about. Well, do you have the heaters on in your house yet? Your warm blanket? Hot water bottle? It's getting colder at nights. But I imagine you do have a bed to sleep in. Can you imagine sleeping outside in the cold, in the rain, all night, day after day? The last person I want to speak about is not somebody who lives in America or in India, but it's about a man that works in Dumfries, and he's called Craig Nielsen. Now Craig works for a group of Christians called Bethany Christian Trust, and they do three things with their time as followers of Jesus. They're maybe not as famous as the other people I've talked about, but for the people they've helped, I think they would say they are just as important. The first thing they try and do is prevent boys and girls, or mums or dads, or even grandparents from becoming homeless and getting themselves into trouble. That they go and they try and prevent that from happening. But sometimes people can get themselves into trouble and they have to sleep outside, in parks, behind shops. And so Bethany have a second type of work that they do, which is to help. If they can't prevent people from going into trouble, they try and help the people who find themselves in trouble. They can give people a bed for the night, a warm breakfast in the morning, practical things like sleeping bags and jackets, and offer people services to help them work their way back to having maybe a house or a job, or just being able to see a doctor or a dentist. And the third thing that they do is teaching. So they try and prevent people from getting into trouble. They also help those who are in trouble. And for those they've helped, they offer ongoing teaching, which means they would help you meet people who would show you how to spend money properly, how to run a house, how to be a better person. And they do all this by charity, through the giving of churches like Penningham. And maybe you came to a Christmas tree festival. I know you certainly gave in Christmas trees every single year, and that helped Bethany help 7,000 people per year. And they did all that to be good disciples of Jesus, so that people could have not just a better Christmas, but a better life. So you can see all through history and all across the world, from Israel, where Jesus was born, to Mother Teresa in Calcutta, to Martin Luther King in America, to William Wilberforce in England, and to people like Craig Nielsen in Dumfries in Scotland. You will find disciples of Jesus, some more famous than others, all known to God, doing very important work. Well, thanks for listening, boys and girls, and I hope this has been very helpful for you, and I'll see you next time when I speak about a different topic on Christianity. Bye.